The autumn rain pelted against the windows of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat in her private study, staring at the encrypted message on her phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the words that would change everything she thought she knew about the royal family she had married into. The sender was anonymous, but the information contained within was too detailed, too specific to be fabricated. "Your Royal Highness," the message began, "what I'm about to tell you will shake the very foundations of your marriage and your position within the monarchy. Queen Camilla has been orchestrating a systematic campaign to undermine your influence and ultimately remove you from the line of succession. The evidence I possess spans 5 years of careful documentation." Catherine set the phone down with shaking hands. 5 years. That would take her back to just after her marriage to William, when she was still finding her footing in the complex world of royal protocol and palace politics. She had always sensed something beneath the surface, subtle, undermining disguise as helpful guidance. But she had attributed it to the natural adjustment period of joining such an established institution. The message continued with specifics that made her blood run cold. Private conversations she had shared with William had somehow found their way to tabloid journalists, but always with just enough distortion to make her appear naive or out of touch. Charitable initiatives she had proposed were mysteriously blocked or delayed in committee, only to resurface months later under different royal patronage. Staff members who had shown particular loyalty to her had been quietly reassigned or had suddenly found better opportunities elsewhere. But it was the final revelation that truly shattered her composure. The anonymous source claimed to have recordings of conversations between Camilla and certain members of the press, conversations in which William's stepmother had explicitly discussed ways to make Catherine appear unstable, unfit for her role, and ultimately unsuitable as a future queen consort. As Catherine absorbed this information, her mind raced back through countless interactions she had dismissed as awkward moments or simple misunderstandings. Camilla's seemingly innocent suggestions that she might want to take a step back from public duties to focus on the children. The way certain courtiers would exchange glances when she entered a room. The subtle but persistent questioning of her judgment in private family meetings. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside her study made her quickly close the phone and compose herself. William would be returning from his engagement at the Royal Foundation, and she couldn't let him see her in this state, not until she had time to process what she had learned and decide how to proceed. "Kate," William's voice called out as he entered the room, still wearing his formal suit from the afternoon's event. His tie was loosened, and there was a weariness in his eyes that had become more pronounced in recent months. "You look pale. Are you feeling all right?" She forced a smile, the same smile she had perfected over years of public appearances. "Just tired." "How did the foundation meeting go?" William moved to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked gardens. "Productive, but something strange happened. James mentioned that there have been inquiries from journalists about our private charitable discussions. Someone's been feeding them information about conversations that should have been confidential." Catherine's heart began to race, but she kept her voice steady. "What kind of information?" "Details about your proposed mental health initiative for military families. Things you only mentioned in family meetings." William turned to face her, confusion evident in his expression. "The timing is odd. Just as you're gaining momentum with the project, suddenly, there are questions about whether it's appropriate for you to be involved with military families, given your lack of direct military experience." The pattern was becoming clearer now, and Catherine felt a mixture of vindication and horror. Her anonymous correspondent had been telling the truth. Who else was present during those family meetings? William considered the question. The usual suspects. Father, Camilla, a few senior advisors. "Why do you ask?" Before Catherine could respond, her phone buzzed with another message. This time, the sender had included a link to an encrypted file. "Open this when you're alone," the message read. "But be prepared. The evidence I'm about to share will require tremendous courage to act upon." "Sorry, darling," she said, silencing the phone. Just in confirming tomorrow's schedule. William nodded, but she could see he was still troubled by the afternoon's revelations about the leaked information. Kate, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Her pulse quickened. Of course. Have you been feeling isolated lately? In the family, I mean. You seem distant, more guarded than usual. Catherine studied her husband's face, seeing genuine concern there, but also something else. Doubt. The seed of suspicion that had clearly been planted and carefully cultivated. What makes you ask that? Camilla mentioned that you seemed overwhelmed at last week's family dinner. She suggested that maybe the pressure of royal duties is affecting you more than you're willing to admit. William sat down across from her, reaching for her hands. If you're struggling, you can tell me. We can find ways to reduce your public commitments. There it was, the trap that had been so carefully laid. Catherine realized with crystal clarity that she was meant to accept this narrative, to embrace the role of the overwhelmed princess who needed to step back from public life. Once she agreed to reduce her duties, it would be a short path to further marginalization and eventual irrelevance. William, she said carefully, what if I told you that I don't feel overwhelmed by my duties, but rather by the sense that someone is actively working to undermine my efforts? His expression shifted, becoming more guarded. That's a serious accusation, Kate. Who would want to undermine you? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that neither was quite ready to explore. Catherine realized that her husband might already suspect the truth, but was struggling with the implications of confronting it. I don't have proof, she said, choosing her words carefully. But I've started to notice patterns. Conversations that somehow become public. Projects that get inexplicably delayed or reassigned. Staff changes that always seem to coincide with my gaining confidence in certain areas. William was quiet for a long moment, and Catherine could see him processing her words against his own observations. You're talking about systematic interference. I'm talking about someone with access to our private conversations and the influence to affect palace operations. The implications were clear, even if she wasn't naming names. William's face grew pale as he considered what she was suggesting. Kate, if what you're implying is true, it would mean that someone very close to us has been playing a very long game. Before William could respond, there was a knock at the study door. Enter, William called out, and Catherine was surprised to see Camilla herself appear in the doorway. I hope I'm not interrupting, Camilla said with her characteristic smile. But Catherine noticed how her eyes quickly scanned the room, taking in their serious expressions and tense body language. Charles is looking for you, William. Something about tomorrow's schedule needs to be adjusted. I'll be right there, William replied, but Catherine could see the reluctance in his posture. Camilla's gaze lingered on Catherine for a moment longer than necessary. Catherine, dear, you look tired. Are you sure you're up for the charity gala tomorrow evening? It would be perfectly understandable if you needed to cancel. These events can be quite draining. It was perfectly executed, Catherine realized. The concern, the suggestion, the implication that she might not be capable of handling her duties. And William was watching this interaction with new awareness, beginning to see the pattern she had described. I'm looking forward to it. Actually, Catherine replied evenly. The cause is very important to me, and I've been preparing for weeks. Of course, dear. I just want to make sure you're not pushing yourself too hard. Camilla's smile never wavered, but Catherine caught something else in her expression. A flicker of calculation, as if she was adjusting her approach in real time. After Camilla left to fetch William, Catherine was alone with her thoughts and the weight of the encrypted file waiting on her phone. She knew that opening it would cross a line from suspicion to knowledge, from uncomfortable awareness to the burden of proof. Once she saw whatever evidence her anonymous correspondent had gathered, there would be no going back to the comfortable fiction of palace harmony. But as she sat in the gathering darkness of her study, listening to the rain against the windows, Catherine realized that the comfortable fiction had already been shattered. The only question now was whether she would have the courage to act on what she was about to discover, and whether William would stand with her when the full truth came to light. The encrypted file seemed to pulse with potential energy, waiting to reveal secrets that could reshape the monarchy itself. Catherine's finger hovered over the link, knowing that her next choice would determine not just her own future, but the future of the royal family and everything she had worked to build within it. The rain continued to fall outside, washing away the last remnants of her innocence about the institution she had sworn to serve. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new performances, new opportunities for those working against her to advance their cause. But tonight, she would finally see the full scope of what she was truly fighting against. With a deep breath, Catherine tapped the link and waited for the truth to load. The encrypted file took several minutes to download, and with each passing second, Catherine felt her heart rate increase. When it finally opened, she found herself looking at a meticulously organized digital folder containing dozens of audio files, email screenshots, and what appeared to be meeting transcripts spanning several years. The anonymous sender had included a detailed index, organized chronologically, with brief descriptions of each piece of evidence. She clicked on the first audio file, dated just 6 months after her wedding to William. The quality was surprisingly clear, and she immediately recognized Camilla's voice speaking to someone whose identity was noted in the file as a senior editor at a major tabloid newspaper. The girl has potential, certainly, but she lacks the sophistication for this role. Camilla's voice came through the speakers with chilling clarity. She's making mistakes already, small ones, but they're adding up. The way she handled the Commonwealth reception last week was quite telling. Too eager, too familiar with people she barely knows. It suggests a fundamental misunderstanding of royal protocol. The conversation continued for nearly 20 minutes, with Camilla systematically dissecting Catherine's early public appearances, highlighting what she characterized as missteps and signs of unsuitability for royal life. But it was the strategic nature of the discussion that truly shocked Catherine. This wasn't idle gossip or genuine concern about her adjustment period. This was calculated character assassination. The key is patience, Camilla continued in the recording. Direct attacks would be too obvious and would likely backfire, creating sympathy for her. But a gradual pattern of documented concerns, supported by carefully chosen examples, could paint a picture of someone who simply isn't equipped for the demands of modern royalty. Catherine paused the recording, her hands shaking as she processed what she was hearing. This conversation had taken place while she was still in her honeymoon period, when she had trusted Camilla's guidance and advice as coming from a place of genuine mentorship. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. The next file was an email exchange between Camilla and a palace communications director, discussing Catherine's proposed involvement with a homeless charity. The messages revealed a deliberate strategy to delay approval for the initiative while simultaneously feeding concerns to the press about Catherine's naive understanding of complex social issues. "We need to be careful here," the communications director had written. "The Princess of Wales's interest in homelessness could actually be quite beneficial for our public image, especially with younger demographics." Camilla's response was swift and decisive. "I understand the potential benefits, but we must consider whether she's the right person to lead such a sensitive initiative. Her background, while admirable, hasn't prepared her for the complexities of housing policy and urban poverty. Perhaps we could find a way to redirect her enthusiasm towards something more suited to her experience level." The emails that followed showed a systematic dismantling of Catherine's charitable proposal, with legitimate concerns about policy complexity being weaponized to undermine her credibility. By the time the initiative was finally approved, it had been so diluted and restructured that Catherine's original vision was barely recognizable. Catherine clicked through file after file, each one revealing another layer of the conspiracy against her. Phone call transcripts showed Camilla sharing private family conversations with journalists, always with enough plausible deniability to avoid direct consequences. Meeting minutes revealed how her stepmother-in-law had consistently voted against Catherine's proposals in palace committees while maintaining a facade of support in public. One particularly damning audio file captured a conversation between Camilla and King Charles himself. Catherine's finger hesitated over the play button, uncertain if she was ready to hear her father-in-law's involvement in the scheme against her. She's popular with the public, I'll give her that. Charles's voice was clearly audible, though he sounded tired. But popularity isn't everything. The monarchy needs stability, consistency. Catherine's approach is too modern, too willing to break with tradition. Exactly my point, Charles. She doesn't understand that our strength comes from continuity, not change. Her instincts are to democratize everything, to make the royal family more accessible and relatable. It's admirable in theory, but it ultimately undermines the mystique that maintains our relevance. Catherine felt sick as she listened to her father-in-law and stepmother-in-law discussing her as if she were a political problem to be managed rather than a family member to be supported. The conversation revealed that the campaign against her wasn't just about personal rivalry or jealousy, but about fundamentally different visions for the future of the monarchy. What about William? Charles asked in the recording. He seems quite committed to her approach. William can be guided, Camilla replied with confidence. He trusts my judgment, especially on matters of royal protocol and tradition. If we can demonstrate that Catherine's methods are creating problems, he'll come around to our perspective. He's pragmatic enough to see reason when presented with evidence. The implication was clear. They were working to turn William against her, using his respect for royal tradition and his trust in Camilla's experience to gradually erode his support for Catherine's initiatives and, potentially, for Catherine herself. As she continued through the files, Catherine discovered evidence of planted stories in the press, manipulated scheduling conflicts that made her appear unreliable, and even sabotaged public appearances where technical problems or protocol mix-ups had been deliberately orchestrated to make her look incompetent. One email exchange particularly caught her attention. It was between Camilla and a senior courtier, discussing a charity event where Catherine had been scheduled to give a major speech about mental health awareness. The messages revealed that Camilla had instructed the courtier to provide Catherine with outdated statistics and discredited research, ensuring that her speech would be criticized by experts and advocates. The goal isn't to humiliate her, Camilla had written, but to create a pattern of small failures that accumulate over time. Each incident by itself is forgettable, but together they create a narrative of incompetence that becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. The strategy was diabolical in its subtlety. Catherine now understood why she had often felt confused and undermined in her royal duties, never quite able to identify the source of the problems that seemed to plague her efforts. The issues had been created deliberately, designed to erode her confidence and public standing while maintaining plausible deniability for those orchestrating them. Near the end of the file archive, Catherine found recordings that were much more recent, some from just weeks earlier. These revealed that the campaign against her had entered a new phase, with discussions about how to create a narrative around her mental health and stability. The public loves her, but they also worry about her. Camilla's voice came through clearly in one recording. All those comparisons to Diana have created anxiety about history repeating itself. We can use that concern constructively, position it as protective rather than critical. The conversation continued with chilling clinical detachment as Camilla outlined a strategy to gradually introduce questions about Catherine's ability to handle the pressure of royal life. The plan involved using her anonymous sources to plant stories about her being overwhelmed and struggling with the demands of modern royalty. The key is to make it seem like concern for her well-being. The recording continued. William is already worried about the pressure she faces. If we can amplify those concerns, create situations that validate his fears, he might start to see reducing her duties as protective rather than punitive. Catherine realized that the very conversation she had just had with William had been anticipated and orchestrated. His questions about her feeling isolated, his mention of Camilla's concerns about her being overwhelmed, it was all part of a carefully crafted script designed to make her doubt herself and accept a diminished role. The final file in the archive was a video recording apparently taken secretly during a private meeting between Camilla and several senior advisors. The quality was grainy, but the audio was clear enough to understand the discussion about what they termed the Catherine problem. "She's becoming too influential," one advisor noted. "The younger generation sees her as the future of the monarchy, more so than they see William in some cases. That's not necessarily problematic, but her vision for that future doesn't align with our institutional goals." Camilla nodded thoughtfully. "The challenge is that removing her entirely isn't feasible. The public would never accept it, and it would create a scandal that could damage the monarchy for generations. We need a more surgical approach." "What did you have in mind?" "Marginalization through apparent choice," Camilla replied. "If Catherine voluntarily steps back from major public duties, citing personal reasons or family priorities, it removes her influence while maintaining sympathy for her as a person." The conversation continued with a detailed discussion of how to create circumstances that would make Catherine want to retreat from public life. The plans included increased media scrutiny, manufactured controversies around her charitable work, and what they euphemistically called family pressure to prioritize her children over her royal duties. Catherine closed the final file and sat in stunned silence. The scope of the conspiracy against her was far beyond anything she had imagined. This wasn't palace intrigue or personal jealousy. It was a systematic campaign to neutralize her influence and reshape the future of the monarchy according to Camilla's vision. She looked at her phone again and saw another message from her anonymous correspondent. "I know this is overwhelming, but there's something else you need to know. They're planning to accelerate the timeline. William is being positioned to make a choice between supporting you and protecting the institution. The charity gala tomorrow night isn't just an event, it's a test. They've arranged for something to go wrong, something that will force William to choose between standing by you publicly or distancing himself to protect the royal family's reputation." Catherine's blood ran cold as she read the message. Tomorrow night's gala was for a cause she cared deeply about, and she had spent weeks preparing for what was meant to be a major speech about the importance of mental health resources for young people. Now she understood that the event had been weaponized against her, turned into a trap that would force a crisis in her marriage and her position within the royal family. She looked at the clock and realized that William had been gone for over an hour. The meeting with his father was taking longer than expected, and she wondered if he was already being presented with the evidence of her instability, being prepared for whatever disaster was planned for the following evening. Catherine stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked grounds of Kensington Palace. Somewhere in the surrounding buildings, people were working to destroy everything she had built, everything she hoped to achieve in her role as future queen. But now she had evidence of their plans, and more importantly, she had advance warning of their next move. The question was what she could do with that knowledge. Confronting Camilla directly would likely prompt a denial and acceleration of their timeline. Going to Charles would mean presenting evidence against his wife, creating a family crisis that could have unpredictable consequences. And approaching William with recordings of his stepmother and father discussing her removal would test his loyalty in ways she wasn't sure their marriage could survive. As she stood at the window, Catherine made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't be a passive victim of their conspiracy. Instead, she would turn tomorrow night's planned disaster into her own opportunity. If they wanted to test her resolve and William's loyalty, she would make sure the test revealed their true loyalties as well. The evening of the charity gala arrived with an unseasonable chill that seemed to mirror the tension Catherine felt as she prepared for what she now knew would be the most important evening of her royal career. She had spent the day carefully reviewing the evidence from her anonymous source while maintaining the appearance of normal preparation for the event. Her dresser had suggested the midnight blue gown with subtle sparkles that caught the light beautifully, perfect for the cameras that would document every moment of the evening. But Catherine had chosen differently. Instead, she selected a deep emerald dress that had been a gift from William early in their marriage, one that held personal significance and would send a subtle message about where her loyalties lay. As she applied her makeup, Catherine reflected on the plan she had developed overnight. She couldn't prevent whatever sabotage Camilla had arranged for the evening, but she could control her response to it. More importantly, she could ensure that William was positioned to see the truth when it revealed itself. "You look beautiful," William said as he entered their bedroom, adjusting his formal evening wear. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Their conversation with his father had clearly left him unsettled. "Thank you," she replied, turning to face him fully. "William, before we leave tonight, I need you to promise me something." He raised an eyebrow, surprised by the serious tone in her voice. "What kind of promise?" "Promise me that whatever happens tonight, you'll remember that I love you and I love this family. Promise me that you'll consider the source of any information you receive about me, and ask yourself who benefits from creating doubt between us." William's expression grew concerned. "Kate, what's brought this on? You're starting to worry me." Catherine moved closer to him, taking his hands in hers. "I'm not asking you to understand right now. I'm asking you to trust me, the way I've trusted you through everything we've faced together. Can you do that?" She could see him struggling with the request, clearly torn between his instinctive trust in her and whatever doubts had been planted during his conversations with his family. "Of course I trust you. But if something's wrong, if you're concerned about tonight, then trust that I can handle it," she interrupted gently. "And trust that when this evening is over, you'll understand everything." They rode to the venue in relative silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Catherine used the time to center herself, reviewing the speech she had prepared while also mentally rehearsing how she would handle whatever crisis was about to unfold. William seemed distant, checking his phone repeatedly and exchanging tense glances with his security detail. The gala was being held at the Natural History Museum, its soaring architecture providing a dramatic backdrop for an evening dedicated to raising funds for youth mental health services. Catherine had been instrumental in organizing the event, working directly with the charity's leadership to ensure maximum impact for the cause she cared so deeply about. As they arrived, Catherine noticed several faces in the crowd that seemed out of place. Journalists she recognized as being particularly sympathetic to Camilla's perspective, photographers positioned in unusual locations, and what appeared to be additional security personnel who weren't part of their normal detail. "The turnout is impressive," William commented as they made their way through the reception, greeting donors and supporters. But Catherine could hear the tension in his voice, and she noticed how his eyes kept scanning the crowd as if looking for something specific. Camilla and Charles arrived shortly after them, and Catherine watched carefully as her stepmother-in-law moved through the crowd with practiced ease. She noticed how Camilla positioned herself near key journalists throughout the evening, engaging in what appeared to be casual conversations, but with an intensity that suggested something more significant was being discussed. "Catherine, darling," Camilla approached with her characteristic warm smile. "What a magnificent turnout. You must be so pleased with how everything has come together." "I am," Catherine replied evenly. "It's wonderful to see so many people committed to supporting young people's mental health." "Indeed. Though I do hope you're not feeling too much pressure about your speech tonight. These events can be quite overwhelming, especially when so much attention is focused on your performance." There was again the subtle undermining disguised as concern. But this time, Catherine was ready for it. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm actually looking forward to it. This cause means a great deal to me, and I have some important things to say." She noticed William listening to their exchange with new attention, perhaps beginning to recognize the pattern she had tried to describe to him. Camilla's expression flickered slightly, a micro-expression of annoyance quickly covered by renewed warmth. "Of course, dear. I'm sure you'll do wonderfully." As the evening progressed, Catherine became increasingly aware of a subtle but growing tension among the event staff. Conversation stopped when she approached, and she noticed several urgent consultations between people who should have been focused on the smooth operation of the gala. During dinner, she received a discreet note from the event coordinator. "Your Royal Highness, We may have a technical issue with the presentation system. Our team is working to resolve it, but we wanted to prepare you for the possibility of delivering your speech without visual aids." Catherine read the note with grim satisfaction. So this was how it would begin. Technical difficulties that would make her appear unprepared, possibly forcing her to fumble through her remarks, or, if she handled it well, allowing her opponents to suggest that she had been lucky rather than competent. "Is everything all right?" William asked, noticing her reading the note. "Just some technical concerns about the presentation," she replied calmly. "Nothing that can't be handled." But William's expression had grown more serious. "Kate, if there are problems with the setup, maybe we should consider postponing your speech. No one would fault you for that, and it might be better than risking." "Risking what?" she asked pointedly. "Risking? I don't know. Appearing unprepared or having the evening's message get lost in technical difficulties." Catherine realized that this too had been anticipated. William was being positioned to suggest she step back, to protect her from a failure that had been manufactured specifically to create this moment of doubt. "William, do you remember why I wanted to be involved with this charity in the first place?" He looked puzzled by the question. "Because you believe in supporting young people's mental health. Because I know what it's like to feel isolated and misunderstood, to question your own judgment when the people around you suggest that your perceptions might be wrong." Catherine's voice was quiet but steady. "These young people need to know that they can trust their own experiences, even when others try to convince them they're mistaken." Something in her tone seemed to break through William's preoccupation with the evening's potential problems. He looked at her with renewed attention, perhaps hearing something beyond her words about the charity. When the time came for her speech, Catherine walked to the podium with complete composure, despite knowing that the technical sabotage was about to reveal itself. Sure enough, when she pressed the remote to advance to her first slide, nothing happened. A murmur went through the audience as technical staff scrambled to address the problem. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine said, her voice clear and confident despite the chaos around her, "it appears that technology has decided to take the evening off. But perhaps that's appropriate, because what I want to talk about tonight isn't something that needs visual aids or prepared slides." She set aside her prepared remarks and spoke from her heart about the isolation that young people face when they feel that their experiences aren't being validated, about the importance of trusting your own perceptions even when others suggest you might be mistaken, and about the courage required to speak truth even when that truth is uncomfortable for those in power. "Sometimes," she continued, looking directly at William in the audience, "the people who claim to care about us the most are the ones who create the very problems we struggle to understand. Sometimes protection becomes control, guidance becomes manipulation, and concern becomes a weapon used against our confidence and autonomy." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Catherine could see that her message was resonating not just with the young people in attendance, but with many of the adults who perhaps recognized their own experiences in her words. "But the most important thing I've learned," she continued, "is that when we have evidence of what's really happening, when we can see the patterns and understand the motivations behind them, we have a choice. We can accept the narrative that others want to impose on us, or we can trust ourselves enough to tell our own story." As she spoke, Catherine noticed Camilla's expression growing increasingly tense. Her stepmother-in-law was clearly recognizing that the evening wasn't proceeding according to plan, that Catherine was turning the technical disaster into a triumph of authentic connection with her audience. But the real test came when Catherine concluded her speech and William stood to applaud. The moment stretched between them, and she could see him processing everything she had said, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words about trust and manipulation. "That was extraordinary," he said when she returned to their table. "But Kate, some of what you said, it felt very personal." "It was personal," she replied simply. "William, when we get home tonight, I need to show you something. Something that will help you understand why this evening was so important." The rest of the gala proceeded smoothly, with Catherine's speech being universally praised as one of the most powerful and authentic royal addresses in recent memory. But She could see Camilla working the room more frantically now, clearly trying to manage a narrative that had spiraled beyond her control. As they prepared to leave, Catherine's anonymous correspondent sent one final message. Brilliant work tonight. They're scrambling to contain the damage. Charles is furious with Camilla for pushing too hard too fast. William is starting to ask questions. You've bought yourself time to reveal the truth on your own terms. During the drive back to Kensington Palace, William was unusually quiet. Finally, he spoke. Kate, that speech tonight, were you talking about us? About our family? Catherine reached over and took his hand, gripping it firmly as she had planned to do from the moment she first learned the truth. I was talking about the importance of facing difficult truths, even when they might hurt people we love. What kind of truths? The kind that explain why you've been questioning my stability, why technical problems always seem to plague my events, and why private conversations somehow find their way to the press. Catherine's voice was steady, but gentle. The kind that explain why someone might want you to see me as overwhelmed and unsuitable for royal duties. William's hand tightened in hers. Kate, what are you saying? I'm saying that when we get home, I'm going to show you evidence of a 5-year campaign to undermine my position and turn you against me. I'm saying that the person who's been orchestrating this campaign is someone we both trust, someone who has access to our private conversations and the influence to affect palace operations. She felt William's hand tremble slightly as the implications of her words settled over him. You're talking about Camilla. I'm talking about letting the evidence speak for itself, Catherine replied. And then, after you've seen everything, we can decide together how to protect our marriage, our children, and the future of the monarchy from people who would sacrifice our happiness for their own vision of what the royal family should be. As their car passed through the gates of Kensington Palace, Catherine felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The performance was over, the trap had been sprung, and now came the moment of truth. Would William stand with her when he saw the full scope of what they were facing? Would their marriage survive the revelation that his stepmother and father had been working to destroy her influence and their unity? The palace loomed ahead of them in the darkness, its windows glowing warmly, but somehow feeling less like a home and more like the setting for the final act of a drama that would determine not just their personal happiness, but the future direction of the British monarchy itself. Catherine gripped William's hand firmly, knowing that in the next few hours, everything would change. The evidence was waiting, the truth was ready to be revealed, and whatever came next, they would face it together or not at all. The night Camilla's plot was finally exposed had arrived, and there would be no going back to the comfortable lies that had sustained them for so long. Tonight, the truth would set them free, or it would tear apart everything they had built together. Catherine was ready for either outcome, because living with the truth, however painful, was better than living with the carefully constructed deception that had nearly destroyed her faith in herself and her place in the world.